because Mark just joined online.
That's cool.
Okay. Alrighty. Right. Hello, Mark.
Hi.
Oh. Fievel, before we start, can
You can do whatever you want. It's your class.
Great. So I'd love to spend a few minutes talking about Pesach.
Who are you
we'll
missing?
Start in 2 minutes. Let's see.
Anybody?
Actually,
Emma?
Emma, but I think she's out of town. But she might be coming. Mark, do you know if she's coming online?
Well, she did say that she was taking her computer with her.
Oh, okay. So we'll wait a couple minutes.
I can text her and see if she's going to be on.
That's okay. We'll wait another minute and see. And then Curtis, I know, is sick.
So Jade's the only one in person.
Yeah, that's why I didn't come in person. The allergies flared up, and I'm making sure it's not something else.
Ooh, that's rough.
Not good.
Mara, are you there? I haven't heard your voice yet.
She likes to type.
She likes to type. You don't have the chat up.
I don't. Here, I'll put the chat up.
There you go. Now I can see if people type.
Yeah. All right. We've got everyone present. I would love to know.
There you go. She said she's making food.
She's making food. Great. Big question for everybody is if you had a chance to go to a Seder, and I know at least Jade and Mark did. If anyone had a chance to go to a Passover Seder, how was it? What was something interesting about it? And what's a question that you had?
I had a good time.
Yeah?
We weren't joking, we said it was going to be long, but it was fine. I felt like there wasn't a lot of downtime, in that span of time. I definitely felt more, I feel like I always come back to that community aspect. Like that's just my favorite part of any of these holidays. So, I don't know, I had a good time.
Good.
Felt good.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite part too, in that there was this moment we gave out these little prizes for finding the afikomen, and one of the prizes was a bunch of squeaky frogs, and the teenager who got that prize figured out that you could stick it to your head, so he passed them out to the whole room, and everybody had a frog on their head, which I've never had happen. Seder. Great. So Anna says, I went to a second night Seder at a synagogue, and I definitely enjoyed it. The rabbi played trivia.
There you go.
Amazing. Awesome.
Yeah, he did like a trivia style quiz about Judaism for the whole congregation, and it was just a good vibe. It was fun.
Oh, great. Can I ask what synagogue you went to?
Romamu on the Upper West Side.
Oh, I've heard that's amazing.
I had a good time.
So Anna, you're in New York?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm trying to remember. What's that rabbi's name?
What, at
I
Romamu?
always forget. Levy. I don't remember.
I don't know who you're thinking of.
But I've heard amazing things.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Mark, how about you?
The question about the Seder?
Yeah, what was your general impression, and were there any questions that came up for you?
Well, I like both of them. The first one was the huge community Seder. That was fun. Being in the room with everyone. Watching everyone bingo, even though, the prizes were out, everyone got excited over it. I laughed at that only, what do we say, like 3 or 4 out of the 7 afikomen were found? Were they ever found?
I found one of them actually the other day.
So there you go. 2 more to go.
2 more to go.
All right, so there's somewhere, we got something to do.
There's one under, I found it under, right next to where the masks are in the front hallway.
Oh, they got a little slightly sneaky, but not all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
The second night was fun. I had never really done a second night. At home, I had done our own little Seder, but it wasn't really the whole thing. So it was interesting to see a family dynamic of the second night Seder where you're still telling the stories, doing the things, but it was still like a community, but it was slightly smaller. So it was nice to be able to experience both of those.
And
Um,
every family does it differently.
do what now?
And every family does it differently
Oh
too.
yeah, yes. They definitely do, compared to, what I've experienced in Monroe versus here. So, uh, you know, it was the little things that were just very fun to partake and, you know,
Nice.
be back doing things again, without like COVID having everything blocked off completely. So,
Right. Exactly. Eddie, did you have a chance to go to a Seder?
No, unfortunately. We just did the little family dinner, invite some friends over and stuff. But
Great. So maybe next year.
hopefully, yeah.
Right. Wonderful. So thank you for those who came in person. I had a blast on Friday night. This was my first Seder at Agudat Achim, so I really had a great time, and I'm happy to take suggestions for next year as well. Um, I would love to introduce. Most of you already know him. Anna just met him, so this is Rabbi Feivel. This is my husband. Um, and he's going to teach us a little bit about shechita, about kosher slaughter. Um, okay, so Emma will not be online. So he's going to teach us a little bit about kosher slaughter today. We do not have a chicken in the room, so nothing graphic today. But there might be some like graphic things talked about. So if that makes you uncomfortable at all, if you feel at all uncomfortable, you can always leave the room, and we should be done around a half hour or so from now. Although mostly it's just going to be looking at cool sharp knives.
Yep, we're gonna switch spots though. So
All right.
you're a little closer to the
And I'm
camera.
going to print stuff out in the other room.
Okay.
I do
So
have
first,
a question for Rabbi Feivel, though.
you've already got a question. I haven't said anything yet.
I know, but how often have you used these knives?
Well, I will give you a little bit of my backstory in just a moment here. It's a good
Okay.
question, Mark. So we'll hold on to that. And if I don't answer it by the end, feel free to ask it again. So first of all, thank you all for letting me guest appear in your class. I love it. I love the opportunity to get to learn new things with all sorts of new people. Some of you I've learned with before, others I've just met. So welcome back to your class. I'm excited to be here. The word shechita is usually literally translated as slaughter. It is the process for killing an animal for food in a way that is kosher. So we can use whatever English word you'd like that fits your vision of what's happening there. But the idea here is that, have you guys already discussed what makes an animal kosher?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've already discussed what makes an animal kosher to begin with. So once you have an animal that is a type of animal that can be kosher, it still isn't actually fit for consumption unless it is killed in a proper manner. And that process is known as shechita. That's where that word comes from. That's what that word means. I myself was trained by a shochet. A shochet is the noun for the person who does shechita. So some people will translate that as butcher. That's not necessarily an accurate translation because sometimes the butcher doesn't do the killing, they just do the cutting up of the meat afterwards. So the shochet is the person who does the shechita, who's the one who actually takes the animal from farm to table. And I was trained by a shochet named Rebbe Shlomo Zacharov over in Israel. When I was living in Jerusalem for 2 years, I spent about, how long were we training for? Maybe 4 or 5 months, I think, was roughly the training period that I went through. A lot of book learning to understand all of the laws and the fine details and the scenarios that go into the process. Some time spent learning how to actually prepare the tools, which we're going to see here in just a moment, as well as hands-on in the field. And I remember that the first time I went to do shechita on the farm, we went to this lovely farm just outside Jerusalem. And it's just like any other skilled labor, it requires practice. You need to get that muscle memory in there. And so the very first time we went out, the goal was to come home with 9 chickens. So we had 9 opportunities to practice. Of those 9, 8 of mine were kosher, which is very exciting. We'll talk about what happens when they're not kosher in just a moment. But 8 of them I came back, but we were living in a little Airbnb apartment, and our fridge did not hold 8 chickens. So I very quickly had to turn around to all of our friends at the yeshiva we were studying at and just offer them free chickens, basically, and say, hey, who wants a chicken? Here, take a chicken. So that was kind of fun. So Mark, to answer your question, they have been used. They have been used a bunch of times. I don't have an exact count. They have not yet been used in Shreveport. We have not yet found a facility that I can come into and prepare. But if anybody would like to help me find such a place, we could absolutely bring kosher chicken to Shreveport. All right, so what goes into the process? Shchita is all about something, a term that if you have not yet learned, you're going to learn right now, which is tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. Tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. That's the Hebrew for it. And what that means is undue pain for the animal. I.e., there is a Jewish principle that governs the laws of shchita that you are not permitted to cause unnecessary pain to an animal for any reason. So everything about the laws of shchita are designed with the animal's health and safety in mind. Now that can feel a little like an oxymoron, right? You're about to kill an animal. How can you possibly be thinking about its health? But it really does start right then and there, which is that an animal that has any kind of health defect is immediately not fit for consumption. I.e., any animal that has a broken limb, any animal that has an illness or a sickness is not worth shechting because it wouldn't be kosher automatically. The animal at the very end of its life must be in full health. Goes right back to that principle of tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, preventing unnecessary pain and suffering to the animal, i.e., you have to actually care for the animals that are in your care before you can actually eat them. The next step goes into the actual slaughter itself. One of the notions of illness or injury also means that once the animal has been killed, it needs to be able to be inspected, and you need to be able to determine whether or not that animal was healthy at the time of its death. Which means many forms of slaughter that are used in today's modern society go out the window because they prevent you from actually checking the health and safety of the animal beforehand. So guns are outright, are just completely out. You cannot hunt an animal with a gun and have it be kosher for 2 reasons. Number one, the lead poisoning or the gunpowder residue causes what is seen as injury. If you don't get a clean kill, you could be causing the animal to actually suffer for a long time and bleed out before it dies in pain. And even if you could take out those 2 things, it was an absolute perfect kill, and somehow there was no gunpowder involved or whatever, it still does enough damage to the animal that you can't actually inspect the animal afterwards, because any damage, let's say a broken bone, things of that nature that you find, you'd never know whether or not that was caused by the bullet or whether or not the animal was sick before you killed it. Same goes with things like bow hunting. In many modern day slaughterhouses, they use these like I don't even know what they're called. Stun gun. Thank you. Stun guns, which cause damage to the bones of the animal, etc. So none of that can be used, which means the only method that is viable for kosher slaughter is with a knife. And I've got some show and tell. If there are any questions, by the way, at any point while I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand or type them in the chat. I can see the chat, and I will interrupt myself to address questions. This knife, which I'll hold up to the screen, and just for comparison of size, it's about the length of my hand here plus the handle. You can see is in a protective case because this knife is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly sharp. In fact, the Shrita knife, and I'm sorry that Emma's not here given her medical background here, has been clinically and scientifically proven to be the single sharpest knife that is used in any profession on the planet. It is sharper than a halal knife used in Muslim slaughter. It is sharper than a scalpel used in surgery. And they've done laser tests on the edge of these blades to actually determine that. So this is a Shrita knife. You can see it's very shiny. That's not, it doesn't have to be. That's just because I like to keep it clean. So that, again, you can inspect every element of the slaughter as it's done. This knife has actually been handmade by a family in Israel who has been making Shrita knives for 4 generations. They boast all the way back to the late 1600s in their family business. And there are a couple things right off the bat before we get to the sharpness that you'll notice about this knife. Does anybody notice the shape of the knife? Can anybody describe what they see in terms of the shape of this knife versus other knives you've seen? Any comments at all? Any observations?
It's rectangular? Or square?
Good. It is rectangular as opposed to coming to a point, right? Good. Very nice. Mark said the same thing in the chat. It's rectangular. It has an actual edge here, and it has an edge here. And the reason for that is because when you actually do the slaughter, it's very important that you maintain contact with the knife at all times, because if you were to lift the knife, if the knife were to separate and then come back in contact with the animal, essentially what you're doing is you're cutting twice. You're making a second incision, and that is unnecessary pain to the animal. Once you take the knife to the animal, that should be it. You should be able, a skilled shochet, not only should be able to, but has to be able to finish what they start in the same movement that they begin it. So the corners prevent you from actually catching an edge of the knife on the animal and causing a puncture wound, as well as prevents any unnecessary deviation from the contact. The moment it's there, and don't worry, I'm going to use the back of the blade here, not the sharp end, but the moment that contact comes into play, it maintains contact the entire time, which actually leads us next to the length of the blade. This blade is only allowed to be used on birds. So this would be chicken, turkey, goose, duck, etc., kosher birds. Anybody want to guess why this knife is not permitted on larger animals?
Would it be because of the size of it?
In what sense?
Well, I think they'd need a larger blade.
Okay, why though, Jade? Why would they need a larger blade?
Bigger neck?
Bingo, that's exactly right. All right, so where is Shrita performed? Good, Mark also said length here. Shrita is performed on the throat of the animal, and we'll talk about exactly what that means in just a second here, but it's performed on the throat. And just like, as I mentioned, it cannot come off for any reason once you begin until you finish the slaughter. Same thing. So if I cannot get all the way across the throat of the animal, the knife cannot be used. And so the laws of Shrita require that the length of the knife is at minimum twice the length of the throat of the animal that it's being used on. So a bird's neck is probably about half of the, or I should say a chicken's neck is probably about half the width of your forearm, give or take. It's very, very small. Obviously, larger birds are going to have larger throats. This knife will work on all mainstream birds that are consumed. It's probably about, I don't know, 6 inches in length, something around that nature.
Is it big enough for a turkey?
It is big enough for a turkey. The question was, is it big enough for a turkey? And yes, it is. It can be used on a turkey. Turkeys are a little bit trickier to shecht, not because they're bigger, but because they are, or sorry, not because the throat is bigger, but because they are much more muscular birds, and holding them is a whole trick in and of itself. A lot of shochets will use a second person to hold a turkey or a goose, whereas for a chicken, I can actually, even with my small hands, I can hold the entire chicken with one hand and shecht with the other.
I would not want to try to be the person holding the goose down.
Yeah, holding the goose down is probably, I would not want to do that by myself. I would want a second hand. Geese are mean. That being said, there are techniques that we learn to try to also calm the bird right beforehand as well. You don't want to be shechting a bird that is freaking out everywhere for a couple reasons. Number one goes right back to that principle. Anybody remember the Hebrew? I don't really expect you to. It's okay. Tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. In fact, Aaron, I'm going to write it in the chat here.
I think it's in our books.
Is it in the books? It might be in the books somewhere. To everyone. Tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. Tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. You don't want a bird that's scared and freaked out, right? You are about to take a life, and that requires understanding and acknowledging exactly what it is you're doing and having compassion for that animal. So number one is, for Jewish value reason, we want to calm the bird. The second reason you want to calm the bird is these knives are really, really sharp, and you don't want to accidentally drop the knife or have the knife get knocked out of your hand by a thrashing bird and have it come straight back at yourself. I actually dropped this knife one time while I was cleaning it, and out of sheer reaction of, oh, catch the thing you drop, I slit my left forefinger straight down. Thankfully, it hit the nail, so it didn't go into my bone at all. But I did have to go to the ER and have that taken care of. And I actually lost feeling in this finger for about a year and a half before it came back. I'd kind of resigned myself to just having permanent nerve damage. And then it actually did come back eventually, which is kind of crazy. But again, it just goes to show you just how sharp this knife is. And again, we'll talk about that in just a second here.
What does it say on the...
Oh, so Jade noticed, I don't know if we can read that through the screen here, but there is, yeah, it's too dark, but there are words actually on either side of the hilt here. One side is actually the address of the knife maker, that's the knife maker's mark, and the other side is my Hebrew name.
Cool.
So we've got, I just had that little inscription put in when I bought it. You'll also notice, by the way, it's what we call a through tang, which means the entire knife is one solid piece. It's not a knife that's here that's attached to a handle. These little rivets actually go through the same piece of metal. That is this knife here. That just produces a stronger knife. That's purely so that the knife doesn't break while you're using it. So again, structural integrity of the knife is important because, again, tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. We don't want anything to go wrong during the course of the shechita for the sake of the animal. We're already taking its life. We don't need that to cause any extra pain. Okay, so once you have the right size knife for the animal that you're going to be approaching, now you need to make sure the knife is sharp enough. And there are two terms that shochets will use, and the phrase in Hebrew is chad vechalak. Chad means smooth, and chalak means sharp. So what do we mean by smooth and sharp? Sharpness is actually defined by the point of the knife. So if we were to look in really, really closely at this angle of the knife, you'd notice that it comes to a little bit of a point on the edge. So sharpness is how thick or thin is that point. So the back of the knife is not sharp at all because it's square at the bottom. There is no point there, so that's not sharp. Smoothness is exactly what it sounds like. It means that there are no nicks anywhere in the knife, meaning if you were to run something along the edge, it would not get caught on any ridge or bumpy area of the knife itself. And therein poses our problem. Because if something is so sharp that it will go straight through a piece of paper like butter, how in the world do you test it for smoothness? Anyone want to guess? Ooh, Eddie, do that again. Did you just guess it right on your first go-round? That's impressive.
I didn't guess. I'm sorry. I remember we talked about it before.
Oh, we talked about it before. Okay, good. So Eddie pointed to the back of his fingernail. He pointed to his fingernail. Now here's the problem. If we were to use a material to try to test the smoothness, it's either going to catch because the material is not smooth, or it's going to get cut by the knife, which means you can't test the smoothness. So the only way to test it is with a body part that is sensitive enough to actually tell whether or not it's smooth. But most of our body is very, very flimsy and very, very fragile and will be absolutely devastated by a knife. One of the sages in the books of codes that talks about the laws for shechita actually suggests that we use our tongue, because our tongue is a very sensitive part of the body. Do not ever lick a knife. That is the worst idea. I don't think so. It's the worst idea ever. The problem, in addition, though, to using a part of your body, aside from the fact that you're going to cut yourself, Mark says, yeah, I'm going to do that tomorrow and get out of work. Mark, do not lick a knife. Aside from the fact that you'll cut yourself if you use your normal body parts, is that over time, all of those cuts will scar and make that part of your body no longer sensitive enough to even be able to test the smoothness. The only part of our body that is strong enough and sensitive enough to actually test a knife without doing damage is our fingernails. It's the only part of our body that works. So the way this works to test a knife is you have to actually take the back of your fingernail and test three ways. From all the way from the one edge to the next, we have to test the right side, then the left side, and then the top. And you'll see my fingernail just glides right over that, no problem. If there had been any kind of itty-bitty nick whatsoever, I mean, even to the point where you couldn't see it with your eye, your fingernail would catch. You'd feel that little sort of delay. And that would tell you the knife is no longer ready for shechita. And in fact, a knife that is used that has not been checked is automatically deemed as an unkosher kill, and that animal is no longer fit for consumption and instead needs to be donated. So one of the things that all kosher slaughterhouses will do, or kosher farms, is they'll work with another non-Jewish facility. And any animal that is deemed not kosher because something went wrong with the kill, or because they found out later that the animal had a broken bone or something they didn't catch beforehand, they'll donate that animal to another facility that is not kosher so that the animal doesn't go to waste. Again, tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, along with the notion that we don't want to waste in this world. So that's the sharpness of the knife. It is the only knife that is tested by hand like that and is held to those kinds of standards for any profession in the world, and as a result is the sharpest knife in use for a profession in the world. Could you get a sharper one? Maybe, but there'd be no use for it. So how do we get it that sharp? That is its own process, which we have to learn as shochetz, which involves, again, doing everything by hand. Now, I do have a fancy little case over here. Not every shochet will have this. You don't need it. I just like fancy cases, and it was a good way for me to store my stuff knowing I'd be traveling overseas. But what I have here, and what every shochet will have, is 1, 2, that's two stones there, 3, 4 stones. And these are what we call whetstones, W-H-E-T, meaning stones you use for sharpening. Not wet as in water is wet, although I actually do have to soak these before I can actually use them. So they do get wet, but they're whetstones, W-H-E-T. And they're rated at 4 different levels of grit. And what I mean by grit is the same thing that I mean with sandpaper. How many little particles per square inch are in the sandpaper determines how rough or smooth the sandpaper is, or in this case, the stones are, which then determines how sharp and smooth you can get the actual blade that you're sharpening. The first step is on this dark gray one here that you can see, and that is at grit 360. For frame of reference, 360 is usually right around where people will use before they paint their houses. So just it's enough to kind of very roughly get the paint off of your house, and then you can have a nice clean coat of paint on there. It is also roughly your average knife sharpener that you'll find as part of your knife block set is roughly somewhere in that range of around 360, 400, something along those lines. So it's a very coarse grit. It's not very sharp, and that one is used to get any major issues out of the blade, to really just kind of grind it down until it's roughly the right shape. And when I was first given my knife, rather when I first bought my knife, my teacher needed to test us on our abilities to sharpen the knives, because they have to know that when we go off on our own, we have the ability to take care of it if something goes wrong. And he took my knife and he took a rock and he just whacked it on the rock and put a giant chunk in there and then handed it back to me and said, "Here, get out that chunk." So that was devastating in my brand new Shrita knife. But that's where that first side comes into play. Once you have it roughly the same shape, you move to the second side, which is this lighter color here, which is 600 grit sandpaper that we use. And that will get it pretty fine. That will get it pretty much sharper than any of the knives in your knife block at home. Your chef's knife that you use for cooking is going to be less sharp than even what this is going to sharpen it with. And that's steps 1 and 2. Because after that, we move from 600 to 1200, and then finally 2000. This is the final sort of polishing grit. If you were to run your hand over this, and Jade will do that for us right now, she won't even notice that there's any grit there. She'll just feel like it's a smooth piece of rock, right? Compare that, Jade. Jade's going to be sort of our tester here. Compare that to this side. Can you tell a difference?
Yeah, this one definitely feels smoother.
A lot smoother. It just kind of glides right across it. And if it was wet, you'd notice it even more. So these are used on, again, just as I tested it with my fingernail, on 1, 2, 3 sides in order to ensure that the knife is completely void of any nicks, any adjustments, any catches, anything that would prevent the kill from being a kosher slaughter. It can take anywhere from seconds to minutes to hours to sharpen one of these knives, depending on how close it is to the finished product to begin with. When my teacher first took out that giant chunk from my blade, it took me about 2 hours to get it back to pace. However, to ensure that every single kill is being done with a kosher knife, a shochet, in theory, will actually check the knife after every single kill. And then if there's any nick whatsoever in the blade, which can happen over the course of shrita, because it can catch on bone, you can drop it, it can, things can be damaged when you put it down on the sink, etc. If anything is found problematic in it after the kill, then it's impossible to know whether or not it was sharp before the kill, and therefore that slaughter is deemed no longer kosher and it gets donated. In major slaughterhouses, it would be way too time consuming to check every single one, so they actually do it in batches. So they might kill 10, 15, 20 chickens, then check the knife, and then the whole batch is okay, or the whole batch gets thrown out. Not thrown out, donated. And that is to ensure that literally along the entire process of shechita, this is being done. Now, when I do it, I don't do it in a massive facility. I'm working with 1 to 10 chickens at a time, so I take the time to check it in between every single chicken because it's not worth in my scale of doing things, it's not worth losing out on a chicken because you forgot to check the knife. Okay. Before I go any further, any questions on the knife and the knife process?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more in the slaughtering process in general.
Mm-hmm.
When they're when they're doing this in a slaughterhouse,
Mhm.
or even in a small farm, does there have to be 2 people there, like the shechter or the shochet and like a checker, or does the shochet double as the checker?
Yeah, really good question. So what Rabbi Sidney asked was, when shechita is being performed, are you required to have a second person verify all of the work that the shochet does? And the answer is no. The shochet can actually act as their own aid, as their own witness to check that things are being done properly. The difference between an individual shechting their own kashrut versus an institution is that the institution is trying to get a hechsher. So a hechsher is one of those little symbols, like the U with the circle around it, or a K with a star on it, etc., that says, we certify that this was done properly. Without an extra checker, you're not going to get a certification. You're not going to get somebody saying, we know that that guy did it right, and therefore we're putting our stamp of approval on it. So in major facilities, they're going to have additional individuals who are monitoring everything the shochet does so that they can put their label on it. But if I were to go out to the farm by myself completely, or into my backyard if I was living in a neighborhood that permitted that, and I shechted a chicken and I brought it to the synagogue and I said, here's a kosher chicken, it would be up to, actually in this case, Rabbi Sidney, as the rabbi of the shul, to say whether or not she trusts me. And if the answer is yes, she trusts that I know what I was doing and I wasn't going to lie about it, then that's fit for the community. And if she says, I don't know you, you're this weird guy that's just trying to peddle kosher chickens, then she would say no thank you, and that would be deemed not kosher for her congregation any longer.
Does that happen? Are there people who do
No.
that?
But there may have been once upon a time
Gotcha.
back in like Eastern Europe, 300 years ago.
Yeah.
But no, that doesn't happen.
There are people who will only approve certain hechshers.
Correct.
So certain Jews will choose to trust certain hechshers.
Okay.
Right.
Depending on who the rabbis are who certify the hechshers. One really good example, even with is it okay if I share?
Yeah.
Circle K, right?
Star K.
Star
You're
K.
talking about Hebrew National?
Hebrew National.
I think it's Star K.
So a few years ago, there was a whole drama that Star K, who are the people who
give the stamp of approval for
give the stamp
for
of
Hebrew
approval,
National hot
right,
dogs.
For Hebrew National hot dogs, A, were not treating their animals right, and B, were not strict in their checking of kashrut.
It was an issue with their transportation, which we'll talk about in a second here, but they were not transporting the animals properly.
Great. And
Yeah.
so the selectivity about hechshers isn't just in the Orthodox community, but a lot of conservative Jews as well chose not to eat Hebrew National because of that.
Right. And Hebrew National, I should say, has since amended their procedures. They now do follow what they need to follow, but many people have sort of never forgiven them for it and don't go back. I have a cousin in Israel who literally will only eat from one certification in Israel and won't trust any others because that's the one her rabbi tells her to go to. So Rabbi Sidney point earlier about understanding where the hechsher is coming from can be very, very important depending on your community. Here we're a little bit more lenient on if it has any symbol, it's probably okay. But I, as an individual, or any random individuals out there, don't come with a symbol. I don't have a Rabbi Feivel, hechsher. So if I showed up and said, here's some chickens that I killed and wrapped for you, it would be up to the rabbi of that community to determine whether or not I was a trustworthy individual for that community. Probably doesn't happen too much these days, unless you're in a small town that only has one shochet. And in fact, I'm told that many years ago, the cantor of Agudath Achim was also a shochet. And so this individual who, led services every week for Shabbat was also the person in town that everyone went to for their kosher chicken. He obviously did not have a hechsher, but the community knew him and trusted him to do what was necessary. All right, so that brings us to the slaughter itself. The quickest way for an animal to be killed, any animal to be killed, is actually through asphyxiation. It's through loss of oxygen. That combined with blood loss, which is essentially asphyxiation because you can't breathe without your blood cells, is the quickest way for any creature on the planet, big or small, humans included, to be killed. It is absolutely the fastest way to go, and the primary source for that intake is going to be the trachea. That is our wind tube that actually allows us to breathe, that goes right through our throat, right next to our esophagus, that is used when we swallow to actually eat food. So the shrita process is one of severing both the trachea and the esophagus. And in large animals, they both have to be severed. At the very least, the majority of both of those pieces of anatomy need to be severed. That is to ensure the quickest death for the animal, and it can happen, depending on the size of the animal, anywhere from a few seconds to maybe 15 seconds. Doesn't matter how big the animal is. When your windpipe is severed, it severs. It's a very, very quick death at that point. And what very well-trained shochets will do is, in addition to severing those crucial piece of anatomy, they will also sever the nerve endings that send signals to the brain of the animal. And what that does is essentially, aside from the split second of that initial incision that's happening, the animal will lose consciousness, will lose sensitivity to pain within an instant, and will die within seconds thereafter. With the average sized chicken, that chicken will go from alive to completely dead in less than 3 seconds. So it's a very, very, very fast process. Again, it would be impossible for me to say that the animal experiences no pain. At the end of the day, you are creating an incision in a creature that's obviously going to do some damage, but it is as fast as can be possibly done. Even advocates who are anti-shrita because they want to use stun guns and all these other things have tried to do the scientific research to prove that there's a faster, more efficient, safer way of doing it, and everyone has fallen short of that task. It has not been, there is no quicker, more effective method ever discovered, period. So the entire process, which is really crazy to think about, actually, considering the fact that this is over a 2,000-year-old process, everything is done by hand. Everything is done quickly. Everything is done as painlessly as humanly possible to take it from that state of being to that state of becoming food. Once the animal is actually killed, we have another law that comes from the book of Leviticus, which states that you are not permitted to eat the blood of an animal because that's the lifeblood of the creature. So the final stage in the shrita process, the knife has been created, the knife has been checked, the kill has been done. Once the kill happens, the shochet will actually check the trachea, check the esophagus, make sure that that was cleanly severed. And once that's been done, the animal is then drained of all of its blood. That's a very simple process that literally the initial step is hanging the dead animal, the carcass, upside down and literally letting gravity do its work. After a while, and before the animal is then preserved, it goes into what's called a soaking and salting process. This is actually where we get something that is in all of your kitchens, I guarantee it, which is kosher salt. Kosher salt is a misnomer. It doesn't mean the salt is kosher. It means it's the type of size of salt grain used in making an animal kosher. So a better term for it would actually be koshering salt. And what this is, and we can thank the Jews for this amazing cooking invention. Mara probably just used some kosher salt in whatever she's making, I'm guessing. Is that they figured out, however long ago, the exact size of salt needed that it would remove liquid from whatever it comes in contact with without overly drying out the actual meat or whatever else you're putting your kosher salt in, which is why people love it when they're cooking, because it holds on to some of that seasoning and some of that liquid and some of that flavoring. It won't dissolve. It's too big though to dissolve back into the thing you're using. So the way this works is the animal is actually taken off of its rack, placed down, and coated completely inside and out with this koshering salt, with kosher salt. And what that does is it draws any remaining blood out from the animal. Mara says, yes, I can't cook without kosher salt. Fine salt is impossible to hold in my fingers when I'm seasoning and I'm making a zucchini rice casserole. See, there you go. So the salt draws out any remnants of blood that is left, but you obviously can't then eat that salt because it's got all that blood in it. So it's big enough granules that it won't dissolve from the blood. And so what happens after it's been salted is it's then soaked to remove all of the salt that contains that blood. Now, it used to be that soaking and salting was actually done by the buyer, that you would go to your butcher and buy the chicken and then have to soak and salt it yourself. We no longer have to do that in our own homes, so any animal you get that is kosher meat has already been soaked and salted. So when you are cooking, let's say, a rare steak, if it's a kosher steak, there's no such thing as rare in the sense that that redness you're seeing is not actually blood. It's actually from the fats that are in there that sort of have these red juices that come out. So once an animal is deemed kosher and put on your grocery store shelf, there is no more blood left in it. That has all been soaked and salted and drained, and it's actually a two-step process. So you actually soak it, salt it, and then soak it again to really make sure all of that is gone. That was actually the problem with Hebrew National when they had their scandal that Rabbi Sidney was mentioning before, is that in their transportation trucks, it was prior to the soaking and salting, and the blood was actually pooling into the bottom of their transport vans, and the animal was actually sitting in the blood, and once an animal has been soaking in its own blood for long enough, you're not going to get that out. So that was the problem with the Hebrew National trucks. Their trucks were not built to the right specifications. Again, they've since corrected that, but it goes all the way through the whole process in terms of the monitoring of this to make sure that by the time you, as your average grocer, go and buy some groceries that are labeled as kosher, that from start to finish, they have moved from the sharpening of the knife to the soaking of the salting to the packaging and placing it on your table. And that's shechita. Questions? Comments, concerns, frustrations?
You were talking about the process earlier. Was that part of the issue that we had with the miscommunication between the our kosher versus halal? Or
Yes, good. So
okay,
thank you. That's a good question. So here in town, there is a Muslim grocery store that had recently opened up that had indicated they wanted to sell kosher meat. And we were under the impression that that meant they were going to go to a seller and they were going to buy kosher meat and carry it in their store. But for their halal meat, they have a butcher that does all of their own butchering. They have their own version of shechita. Their knives are not as sharp and their process is not as labor intensive. So kosher meat is technically approved by the Muslim community as halal, but not the other way around. And what it turned out that they wanted is they were under the false impression that all it takes for meat to be kosher is that when you do the slaughtering, a rabbi is present and says some blessings and reads some Torah, and then that makes the animal kosher. So they wanted a rabbi to come out to their slaughterhouse and read Torah to the chickens while they were being killed, and that was what they thought kosher was. You'll notice, by the way, nowhere in this did I talk about a rabbi blessing the meat. That is not a part of the process. Now, there are blessings, because everything we do in Judaism is blessings, but the blessing is actually over the process of what's about to happen, and the burying of the blood afterward. There's a ritual of burying the blood of the animal so that you give it essentially a burial, just like you would a human who gets buried when they die. You acknowledge the animal and you bury the blood by covering it in dust and dirt, and then there's a blessing attached to that. But the actual blessing of the animal itself is not a process that's involved. It really comes down to tsa'ar ba'alei chayim and making sure that everything from the knife to the kill to the checking to the processing is done in a proper manner. Which is why we still don't have kosher meat in town, unless somebody wants to find me a farm.
Yeah, I didn't think we went in that great detail, but so now that makes more sense. You are literally in our process, we are literally acknowledging life all the way around, or the life that is being taken.
Exactly. Yep, from start to finish. Very intentional process.
Very respectful, if we gotta eat them.
Right, exactly. That's right. So now in Torah, one of the verses that where actually shechita comes from actually talks about the notion that if it actually says very clearly, if you want to eat meat, you must shecht it, and then it goes into some of these rituals. Now, not all of these are laws that I just described are biblical in nature. Some of them developed through tradition over the years, and where their exact origins are unknown. But one interpretation of the actual Torah verse is that we're literally supposed to do the shechita ourselves. That if you want to eat meat, you yourself have to go learn how to do it and do it. That is obviously not the case of what modern day halacha states. Part of the principle of that permits that is that in Judaism we permit for most commands a shaliach, a designated individual to fulfill a mitzvah on our behalf. So in this case, we're designating the shochet, who is trained and skilled in this process, to provide us with meat. So it's a very interesting process. If we'd actually have an entire series of classes on how you get from the biblical laws of kashrut to the modern day laws of shechita, which I say modern day, but they date back to over 2,000 years, as we know them today, with very little deviation over the generations. One such deviation is that there came a time a few hundred years ago where somebody finally posed the question, well, can a woman be a shochet? To which the answer is, yeah, there's absolutely no reason there's literally no reason that even the most strict of Orthodox Jews could possibly come up with to say that a woman can't do this job. It just wasn't done in Eastern Europe for many years because that just wasn't a female profession. But there have been in recent years several women that I know of who, one of whom actually studied with me at the same time to become what we call shochetetz. The feminine version of shochet is shochetet. So we add an extra t at the end. But that's just because that's Hebrew. All right, any other questions?
Rabbi Feivel?
Yes.
What things were necessary for the facility that you were looking for? Like what are some of the things that this facility needs to have?
Give me 1 second.
Yep.
Sorry, I had another appointment and they just canceled on me, so I just want to tell them not a problem.
It's all good.
Okay. So you're talking about locally, what would I need? Basically, I would need a space where they would permit me to come in and have control of the animal in use from start to finish, where they are not going to have rules and regulations that say, oh, well, they have to do this step or they have to do that step, or, right, I just need a space where I can actually go in with a chicken and say, this is the chicken I'm going to use, and I personally get to handle that from start to finish and walk out with it. A lot of places, the place that I dealt with in Israel, would also raise the chickens themselves, and then they would just sell them to us wholesale. And so if that's an option, that's always an added bonus. Otherwise, then we would also need a place to just buy a healthy chicken from. I try only to work with chickens that I know were also treated well while they were alive. That's not technically a requirement of kosher chicken, although it should be. But I personally will only work with chickens if I know that they've been free-range chickens to begin with. So I would need a dealer who actually has a nice farm, and then I would need a space to actually be able to come in with my equipment and engage in that act and leave with those chickens.
Awesome. Yeah, I was wondering because
not a whole lot, just space really.
Gotcha. I was wondering if like if you were cool with it, I could ask around base and see if and I'd be more than happy to write you or to get you the pass to go on and stuff to see if the kitchen has anything, because the Air Force is all about let's be inclusive and let's do this stuff so people are all happy, and if that's an option, I'd be super happy to do it.
I would be more than happy to have you ask around. I think that would be wonderful. I'd even be happy to do a show and tell to anybody who wants to learn about the process. It'd be absolutely wonderful. If we are going to find a space, I do need to recertify with my teacher first before I actually start doing it, because it's been a number of years since I've actually done it. So I want to make sure that I get recertified and I'm still, good to go. But if I know that there's a space, I can certainly engage in that process, and we can bring some kosher chicken to Shreveport. I think that would be absolutely lovely.
Awesome, sweet.
So we'll be in touch.
Definitely.
Any other questions about the process, or shechita in general, or kashrut in general?
Is there a point at which the knives are no longer good as far as like sharpening them, or is that just depending on how frequently you use them?
It's a great question, and it's actually an amazing thing to see. When I was in Israel, my teacher had only been doing it himself for I think maybe 10 years, but the guy who owned the farm that we went to had been doing it for probably about 45 years. And he told me that he was still using one of his original knives that he started practicing on about 45 years earlier. Now, the thing is, the shechita itself won't cause any damage to the knife if you do it right, unless there's, nick or something along those lines. But the process of sharpening a knife is literally removing metal from the knife. That's how sharpening works. And you're basically shaping it the way that you can think of a potter shaping clay. They have to literally remove clay to get the shape that they want. So after enough sharpenings, what ends up happening is you start removing, in a very straight manner, material from the top until it gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, you're not allowed to go below the hilt, because then you obviously have issues with the shape of the knife again. But you could theoretically go to right about, I don't know, maybe a centimeter or so above this hilt. And I am not even kidding you when I say that's about how big this guy's knife was. I mean, his knife was really on its last legs, but it's really just a matter of whether or not you can continue to sharpen the knife in a way that gives you enough blade and shape to continue to do shechita. So I have actually seen a knife get very, very down to the nub without becoming unkosher.
What's the string?
The string is because my case is broken and I use it to hold the case closed.
Gotcha.
Nothing fancy on that one.
Your fancy case.
My fancy case, I know. Well, because I lost the key, so I had to break the little locks to get it open. That was a shame.
Still a cool case.
Still a nice case, though. It fits it well. I'll fix the locks at some point. All right, so now you have a newfound appreciation for the salt that is in your kitchen. Right? Every time you go and look at that koshering salt, you will know that you have that amazing flavored salt as a result of the fact that Jews gave the world kosher meat. All right, well, listen, that's all I have for you. If you guys think of any questions at all, I am a text or an email away. Rabbi Sydney has my contact info, or you can ask her and she'll pass it along. It was an absolute pleasure getting a chance to learn with all of you today. Anna and Mara, I hope to see you in person one day soon, and enjoy. I think it's New York and Los Angeles we're in, respectively. Everybody else, hopefully I'll see you in shul at some point in time. It's been truly my pleasure, and I look forward to learning with you all again in the future.
Thank you.
Take care, and Chag Sameach, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi Feigl.
The floor is Sydney's, and my other appointment got canceled, so I'm no longer rushing out of here.
Cool. You hanging out, or are you?
I'm gonna hang for a minute while I
Okay.
sort of get all my stuff together, then I'm gonna leave, because I do have another
Alright.
student later.
Make sure to take some puppies with you.
I will.
We have dogs here today.
That's what I missed was Jackson Buddy Love.
I got them really excited that Mark was going to be there.
Did you really?
I did.
Oh.
I mentioned you.
Oh.
All right.
Well, I'll have to make up for it double time next time I see them.
Alrighty, I'm trying to find our midterm review. Just a question for you all. How many people in this space actually had time to go through the whole? Oh, I see Jade went through the midterm review.
Did it.
Who else had a chance to go
You guys are
through
already
it?
The midterm? When did you start?
In
That's
February,
impressive.
I think.
Wow.
I went through where the pieces that I came through. I still have some catch up on,
Okay.
what I missed beforehand. So
Great. All right, and Anna had a chance to go through it. Great. So I think what we'll do then. Well, you know what? We'll still do it. We'll do the blank form, and we'll do it. Huh? It's pretty warm. We'll do the midterm review together. We'll go through because it seems like maybe we're half and half about. If I can find it. Let's see. Where am I?
The old reliable string.
Hmm?
The old reliable string. I was just seeing Rabbi Feigl.
Exactly. I was looking for a bungee. I couldn't find one, so.
So let's do.
But it'll work.
We'll do the blank version, and then those who have had a chance to do this, and even those who haven't, we'll take turns. Buddy, you gotta go too. Maybe not. Buddy's being lazy, which, if those of you who know Buddy, is nothing new. All right. Lots of different things to define. What we'll do is we'll go page by page, and since some of you have gone through entire pages, what you'll do is each person will tell us the answers that you have for that page, and then before we go on, we'll see does anybody disagree or want to add anything. Does that sound good? All right, great. Let me annotate on here. All right, so Jade, since I see you've already got this out, will you tell us what you put for these answers here?
I kept them real simple.
Great.
Okay. I put a covenant.
Mm-hmm.
For mitzvah, I put a commandment.
Mm-hmm.
Halakha, I put Jewish law.
Nice.
And you're gonna have to tell me the pronunciation.
That's B'Tselem Elohim.
B'Tselem Elohim, I put we are all made in God's image.
Nice. All right. For A, B, C, or D, is there anything else anyone wanted to add or change? Great. I think those all are great. All right. The 3 parts of Tanakh are?
Torah.
Nice.
Nevi'im. Is it Neb? Is that
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Ketuvim.
Ketuvim. And what do those mean?
Prophets and writings.
Great. Prophets and writings. All right. All right. And which one goes with which here?
Okay, I hope I have these right.
I'm sure you do.
Parsha is the weekly reading from Torah.
Nice.
Haftarah is weekly reading from prophets.
Nice.
And then Megillah is with holidays.
Great. Amazing.
Which is what we just did with Purim, right?
With Purim, and what we just did the other day with Song of Songs.
Song of Songs, yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
So the 5 Megillot, this is not a question on here, but good to know.
What was that?
So on the 5 Megillot, we've got on Purim we've got Esther. On Passover we've got Song of Songs. On Shavuot we've got the Book of Ruth. On Tisha B'Av we've got Lamentations, and then on Sukkot we've got Ecclesiastes. So those are all of our books, or all of our Megillot. And the 5 books of Torah, Jade?
Genesis,
Mm-hmm.
Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Great. Nice. Thank you. Questions, comments, or concerns about all of this so far?
Pick one.
Fantastic. All right. Mark, do you think you could help us with Jewish diversity? Uh-oh. Is our internet working? Yes.
Ashkenazi is Central Europe,
Mm-hmm.
Central Eastern Europe. Mizrahi is that the Mediterranean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Sephardic is the Arabian Peninsula?
Oh, actually, other way around.
No,
Sorry.
the other way around. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Because they're often
I knew
oops.
I get that one backwards every time.
I do too. I do too. Sorry, wait. We did Mizrahi was there. Sephardic was Mediterranean. Got it.
Yes.
All right. And keep going, Mark.
Is Reform the tradition? I'm sorry. Reform is evolving, right?
Not quite, and that's
Okay.
tricky because it's similar. What do you think conservative is?
That would be mostly constrained, but
Mostly retained. Yeah.
it can evolve.
Great.
Orthodox is binding.
Great. Great. And so you kind of switched to the other two, but I'll explain a little bit. So reform is that halakha isn't binding. So one of the big things about Reform Judaism, one of the really the unique thing about Reform Judaism is that they are not seen as bound by. They don't see halakha as binding. They're not bound by Jewish law. Torah is a great resource, and Talmud are great resources to make our own choices from, but it's very much more of an individualistic way of looking at Judaism. Reconstructionist Judaism is kind of an amalgamation of everything. Judaism is an evolving civilization. There's this naturalistic view of God, so they don't tend to look at God personally, right? They look at God as more of an evolving force, or a force behind nature. And I was talking about this the other day, that with someone in the congregation, that Reconstructionist Judaism rejects the idea of the chosen people. So when you go to a Reconstructionist service, some of the liturgy sounds different because they get rid of everything that talks about chosenness. So in the Torah blessings on Saturday morning, you'll hear Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim. So whoever God who chose us from all of the people, and Reconstructionist Judaism gets rid of that because there's no belief that we are the chosen people. They they see that as offensive. Other questions, comments, concerns about these sections?
That's where school gets tricky because it's keywords that I always miss.
You're good. You're good. You got it. All right, Eddie, I'm not sure if you did this, but Anna said not to call on her. But let's try to figure it out. Eddie, are you
Sure.
present?
Yeah, I looked over it, wasn't able to fill it out though, but I could
Uh-huh.
try a little bit.
Yeah, try it out.
So Rosh Hashanah is New Year, the Jewish New Year.
Yeah, Jewish New Year. Nice. And
And
quite literally, it's the head of the year.
head of the that's the translation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. The Day of Atonement. I knew the name. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
I can help him with that
Yom
one.
Kippur, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Sweet.
Great. Yom Kippur. How about, do you remember Sukkot, Eddie?
Yep, it's the sort of tent that is built for Passover.
Mm-hmm. Not for Passover,
Oh,
but Sukkot is a tent that's built, and Sukkot literally means booths, but it's kind of the feast of booths. And it's, what time of the year is Sukkot in? Anyone remember?
Fall festival.
Yeah, fall festival.
Sukkot
happens in the fall, kind of at the very end of when we might feel comfortable actually sitting in booths outside. Or the
Gotcha.
end and beginning, I guess, because it's still sometimes too hot and sometimes too cold, but like most of the time just right. Do you remember Simchat Torah, Eddie?
No, ma'am.
Great. Anyone else?
That's the completion of Torah, like when
Yeah,
you
completion
no,
of Torah. It's a Torah celebration.
Torah celebration. That's it.
Nice.
Where you wind it back or do the whole thing.
Wait, what do you mean
Everyone
by
gets
wind it back and do the whole thing? You're totally right.
It's where you acknowledge that you've completed the reading of Torah and wait, does everyone parade it around? I forget how we do that. It was done a
Yeah,
little
and
different.
everybody does it differently. So there's a lot of dancing with Torah. There's a lot of, depending on the congregation, there's a lot of singing. We finish the Torah and then we start it again on Simchat Torah.
Because I remember, I think I've observed that more during COVID, where it was kind of rolled out on tables for everyone to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't a lot of singing and dancing because, well, no one was there.
Right. Yeah, hopefully this year we can do more of that. All right, Eddie, what do you think about the victory of the Maccabees over Antiochus?
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, that one we know for sure. What about Esther saves the Jews of Persia from Haman?
Uh-oh.
It just happened about a month ago.
Everyone dresses up. It's kind of like our Halloween.
Purim. There you go.
Yeah, good job. Pesach.
Passover.
Passover. Nice.
I
These
swear
ones are
I
a little
thought this.
trickier. What about Yom HaShoah? Right?
Oh, that's a Holocaust memorial.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't 100% on that one.
I got an email from Benai Zion saying that they were doing one, I think May 1st at
Eddie, are you still there?
Okay, there we go. Sorry, everything froze for some reason.
Well, yeah, I think Rabbi Sydney's still frozen.
Gotcha.
I could hear you, but I lost somebody, so I was trying to figure out who I lost.
Gotcha. Oh,
Yeah, they just dropped, so I'll text Jade and let her know
gotcha.
if she's got her phone. Zoom dropped. They probably know now. It's the library, I think.
Gotcha.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
There you
Yep.
are.
Great, awesome. All right, let me share the screen again. All right. So Yom HaShoah was Holocaust Remembrance Day, and what I was saying to Jade is that every year we have the Shreveport Interfaith Community puts on a beautiful memorial service. This year, I think it's at Broadmoor Methodist, but we'll send out more information about that once it comes up. And I think my favorite part of it is that they have, as part of the service, they give awards to middle schoolers and high schoolers who have created art or written essays. And so they get to read their essays or display their art. It's really beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yom HaAtzmaut. Any idea what that is? Israel Independence Day. Nice. The next holiday that's coming up after Pesach is? Shavuot. Nice. And then Tisha B'Av. Quite literally the 9th of Av. What does Tisha B'Av represent?
Day of mourning.
It's a day of mourning. What are we mourning?
The temple?
The temple, both of them, and also lots of other times of destruction of the Jewish people throughout history.
What is the one that's considered like a Valentine's Day?
That is great question. That is Tu B'Av.
Tu B'Av. Okay, I get them mixed up because they're they start with the T,
So
and I just forget.
So Av is the month. Yeah, Av is the month, and then the first part is the number. So Tisha is the number 9, so it's the 9th of Av, and then 2 is not an actual number, but I'll show you how it works. So in Hebrew, 2 represents the Hebrew letter Tet and Vav, Hebrew letters Tet and Vav, because if you put these two together, it sounds like two. And so what does that have to do with anything? So if you know the Aleph Bet, you can count out what number each of these letters is. You just have to count Bet twice. So Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Vav of 6. Okay, so 6 plus Zayin, Chet, Tet plus 9 is?
Wait, 6 plus 9?
6 plus 9 is 15,
15, yeah.
right? So it's the 15th. It's just a fancy way of saying the 15th of Av. There's some gematria, some number magic. All right. So now that we've said all of that, Eddie, do you know the 2 high holy days?
No, ma'am. I'm not really sure.
That's okay. I think Mark, you mentioned both of them.
High holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right?
Yom Kippur. All right.
Got me
Jade, what are
second
the
guessing
pilgrimage
myself
holidays?
now.
You got it. You're good.
That's Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot.
Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. So we're in one of them right now. Fantastic. Questions that have come up about any of the holidays? Great.
I do have a question, Rabbi Sydney.
Yeah.
Is there I think you mentioned it before, I can't remember the name though, I wrote it down, but the calendar that shows like the Jewish calendar, basically, like a good website for that?
Oh, yes. Great. So heedcal.com is great, and I'll even review it a little bit. So let me pull it up here.
I was like, I know I wrote it down. I just can't remember what it was or where I put it.
Oh yeah, we've been given lots of
halal.com.
tools that will keep us busy
It's
for a while.
fantastic. Exactly. And what's really cool is if there's a holiday going on right now, it'll just it'll display that. So Moadim L'Simcha is the bless or the greeting that we give in the middle of the week of Passover. So it says Moadim L'Simcha. We wish you a very happy Pesach. This website will help you with some daily learning. So if you're doing Mishnah Yomi or Daf Yomi, it'll give you the chapters for that. It'll tell you what the Torah reading is for the week. And also, it'll tell us about all the different holidays. It'll tell us all the dates for the holidays on this year. And then also, will tell us a little bit about the holidays if we click on them. So there's a lot of good stuff on heedcal.com.
The jean dress is really cute.
Huh?
Sorry.
The jean dress.
And I noticed it is untuckit.com. It's representing.
Some pretty cool fits.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Rabbi Feivel's website of choice to buy clothing. Now you know. All right.
Yeah, I plan on checking it out when I drop a little bit more of this.
It's pretty great. You don't have to tuck. What really is annoying about untuckit.com though is the whole point is that it's supposed to be shirts that you don't tuck in.
Gotcha.
And it's mostly oriented towards men, but they have a women's clothing line, and all of the women's shirts are shirts you have to tuck in, which is ridiculous.
Oh,
so that's false advertising, and let them know.
It's ridiculous.
That's great.
Their dresses are cute, but I just can't.
Yeah.
It makes me too mad. All right. I'm going to fill this out. So, high holidays, shofar, tshuva, apples and honey. Remind me what
was that? I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit.
Teshuva. Remind me what teshuva is.
That's returning.
Is that like the one?
Returning.
Returning.
Oh, I like say what you mean to say. That's nice. But it's returning or repentance. Right? The high holidays are all about repentance. What's a shofar?
The ram's horn.
Horn. Nice. And what in the world do apples and honey have to do with the high holidays?
Spring?
It is. The high holidays are actually in fall.
Just like something sweet to start.
Sweet New Year.
Yeah, sweet New Year. Fantastic. Starting your new year with something sweet. What else is fun is that when a little kid starts to learn Hebrew, it's tradition that with every letter they learn, they have a little honey, so that Torah learning starts out sweet. Hello, Anna. All right. Sukkot is Hutz, a lulav and etrog. What are a lulav and etrog?
Lulav is the thing you shake, right?
Mm-hmm.
The etrog is that like a fruit or?
So you shake the big palm and the fruit and a couple of other leaves together. And it's a little bit silly, but it's fun. Hanukkah is when we have menorah and dreidels and latkes. Purim, we have the Megillah, which we talked about before, noisemakers and costumes. Pesach, that's where we are now, the Haggadah, the Seder, the Matzah. What was the Haggadah?
The telling of the story or the Passover
story? That's
story?
Quite literally what Haggadah means. But what else? What is a Haggadah?
Would it be like a service?
Sort of.
It's like the guidebook to the service, right?
Oh, the order
exactly,
of the
exactly.
Seder.
Yeah, so that book that we were using was the guidebook.
Gotcha.
And not all of them come in book form. So like I have a card game form at home, but it's the text that we read off of.
Okay.
Great. Shavuot is dairy, late night study, Book of Ruth. We talked about teshuva a little bit, but Anna, can you define the term chametz and explain how it relates to Pesach, since we're there right now?
So chametz is like the leavening agent, right? That you're not allowed to eat on Passover.
Like leavening in general.
Yeah.
Nice. Great. And any idea what grains that includes in modern practice?
Oh boy. Wheat?
Is it
Yeah, wheat. Wheat is one. There are 5.
is it oats?
Yeah, oats are one.
Spelt.
Spelt. Ah, there we go. Mars says rye and barley. Nice. Great. Fantastic.
Rabbi Sydney,
Lisa, yeah.
is alcohol in any of these categories?
If alcohol has wheat, oats, spelt, rye, or barley in it, then yes.
Gotcha.
So if you have, so wine is good. Wine is fine. Beer generally is not. And if you've got an alcohol that you're unsure of, then you can always call the distributor and see what it's actually made out of.
Because
Gotcha.
like doesn't the whiskeys they have like the rye and some other types, don't they?
Right. There's corn. I think there's corn whiskey also, right?
Mm-hmm.
And tequila, if it's like real tequila, then it should be okay. But if
Yeah.
it's not, then if it's not real tequila, you can't really be sure. So,
No whiskey.
huh?
No whiskey.
No whiskey. We can survive for 8 days.
That's true.
Yes, wine is good. All right. But there are also lots of lists online. So if you really, really want to drink some sort of particular drink over Pesach, you can always search online. They're good lists. All right. Anna's back. Would you like to define for us the meaning of Shabbat?
So the meaning of Shabbat, it's like the day of I don't want to say day of rest, but it's like day of kind of rest. Not
Yeah.
doing work, not creating, not building.
I love that. Right. And literally, Shabbat means rest. So yes, it's a day of rest, but not in the way that we think about rest now. Although we can rest on Shabbat. I do take a 3-hour nap every week. All right, Anna, what are some rituals you might do at the Shabbat table?
I wrote light candles, pray, and eat challah, but I'm not sure that was the third one you were going for.
That's great. What are some other things anyone else can share, things that we might do at the Shabbat table?
Drinking wine.
Drinking wine. Nice.
Big dinner?
Noshing.
Dinner. What did you say, Mark?
Or noshing.
Noshing. You might wash hands before you eat challah. You might, if you have children around, bless your children. Lots of beautiful things to do at the Shabbat table. Great. Anna, what are some activities that you might refrain from to be Shomer Shabbat?
Driving, I guess in the modern world, like using electronics, cooking, eating. Not eating. I mean cooking, building, writing. Although we did talk about writing as like a maybe not on Shabbat, right?
Well, so writing definitely we don't do on Shabbat.
Okay.
But electronics, actually, there's debate.
Okay.
In most communities, they won't use electronics, but it depends in other observant households.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. And what are some activities? I mean, this is kind of the same thing as you were saying above, Anna. Some activities that we might engage in to be Zachor Shabbat, to remember the day, would be everything that we just said: lighting candles, blessing children, all of that fun stuff. Because Zachor is all the stuff that we do. Just because time, I'll do the matching. Shabbat begins
18 minutes before sundown.
There we go. Sudat Shlishit is third meal. Havdalah is when 3 stars appear in the sky. What day? What day of the week when 3 stars appear in the sky?
Saturday night.
Oh, actually, wait. I did that wrong. Look at that.
Shabbat ends when 3 stars
Great.
appear in the sky. And Havdalah is the service that ends.
Fantastic.
With the cup of
Great.
wine. That's the one where you want to make as long sizzle as you can.
Exactly. Right. The sizzle is very important.
That probably explains why I had some bad weeks. I did a quick one.
Oh no. Not good. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns about this page? Shabbat. Fantastic. All right. Mara, I know you take a little bit longer because you're typing, but I'll do some of the matching, but would you define the terms keva and kavanah if you're present? Kippah is going to be the talit. Kippah is the head covering, talit is the prayer shawl, to fill in our leather boxes. Siddur is the ark is the cabinet. Bima is the area often raised where the prayer leader stands.
Also known as the Bima
Did anyone
effect.
have different answers to those? Yes, the Bima effect. Mark, can you explain the Bima effect? It's a phrase that you invented.
The Bima effect is when you get called up to read a prayer or lead one of the responsive readings or even give a speech in front of everyone, and you know exactly what to do, and you just get in front of everyone and kind of freeze, panic, and it goes in weird directions.
Lovely. Well, I hope you don't feel that for so much longer.
Oh, I just called it the beam effect from Justin's speech.
I see.
He felt it. When we were doing.
He did feel it. But the lovely thing is that people still love him.
Oh yeah, no, we just made it a fun word and
effect.
just kept going with it.
All right. Anyone can define the terms keva and kavanah.
Keva and kavanah are the 2 types of prayer, one being
liturgical, and kavanah is like
versus, what was the other one you were saying, Anna?
Like individual.
Individual, and then Mara, nice. So individual, that's an interesting way. I like that way of explaining it. Literally, keva is fixed and kavanah is intention, even though hopefully keva prayer is intentional too. And Mara says, like you were saying, Anna, individual, like self-directed intentional type of prayer versus set prayers. Great. So intentional versus set prayers are kind of more the literal definition. Was there something else you wanted to add, Jade?
Maybe just something balance. Jewish prayer.
Right. The balance of the two makes up Jewish prayer. Jewish prayer. Nice. And then, I know I just wrote all of that, but we'll go to the bottom. A bracha, or blessing, begins with these 6 words. You're welcome to say it with me if you'd like. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Sorry. Any idea what that means?
Blessed are you, Adonai,
Right. Did you?
ruler.
God, ruler, king, ruler of the universe. Love it.
I forget
Great.
how
And
to
then
do
the
it because
Shema.
one's Yisrael, Adonai, Elohim.
Eloheinu Adonai
Adonai,
Good. Great. And there are 20,000 different translations, but one can be here. Israel. Adonai is our God. Adonai is one.
What was the one that you grew up with? Didn't you have a special way of interpreting that
I
with
did.
the way that you studied?
So not something that I studied, but my little brother learned in preschool. I remember it vividly. God is everywhere and God is one. God is everywhere and God is one. Okay, that's more universalistic. But
Okay.
quite literally, Shema means that is a command. So it's a command to listen. Yisrael is the people Israel. That's us. Adonai is the personal name of God. Eloheinu is our God. So God is both the universal God and our particular God. And Adonai Echad, Adonai is one. There's only one God. Great. Last questions, comments, concerns about all of this. We have learned a lot the last few weeks.
I remember more than I thought I did.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is when you live Judaism, when you go to a Seder, when you spend time in Jewish community, it's not as hard to memorize stuff because you spend time living it. And so spending that time really does make a difference. So I'm glad that those who were able to go to a Seder were able to go to a Seder. And we are not going to meet next week because I'll be in Boise, but the week after we will meet, and then we'll be meeting every week after that. So thank you for your patience in all of the classes that we've missed so far, but looking forward to learning more with you. And Moadim l'simcha, Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful end of Passover.